Hey there, thanks for joining me. Episode number 43 of Positioning to Profit. And on today's episode, with everything going on, I've been making the rounds, going on podcasts, virtual summits, a lot of fun actually. So while we are cooped up at home as of the recording of this podcast with the pandemic news, it's a great opportunity to tweak your message, share your message, and it really inspired me to create this episode where I'm going to be covering 7 key rules for your marketing. So consider this a pulse check of sorts to see how you are faring with your marketing during this time and really all the time. So I hope this serves you well, and I hope this finds you happy and healthy, and I'm excited to share this one with you. All right, here we go. Let's go. Hey there, I'm Patty Dominguez. You're about to discover what it means to position your brand and your business to stand out. This show explores the stories of small business owners just like you who are bringing their message out to the world and impacting their tribe. So if you want to take your business to a category of one status, then hang with me, because this podcast shares everything you need to know about how to be more prolific with your brand so that you can have more profits. Hey there, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. And I don't know about you, but not a whole lot has changed for me aside from not being able to travel to conferences and stuff and catching up with friends, which is always a lot of fun with the business that I'm in. I have to tell you, I've actually been more active because I've been really purposeful about doing as many podcasts as possible. If we haven't talked about that, I'll have to do another episode. But in short, podcasting is such a great way to share your message, to synthesize the way that you're stating the value that you bring to the world, and a really great strategy for broadcasting your brand so that any good podcaster has show notes. And so when you have the show notes, their link goes on to their your link goes on to their show notes. And it's such a great way to create that footprint, right? From an SEO standpoint, it's really friendly. So I've been doing a lot of podcasts. I also have been a guest on a couple of virtual summits that are going on right now, and have other virtual summits in the works. So it's a lot of fun, really. And more than anything, one of the things that's been really critical is to understand that you have to pivot. And I know we've heard pivot, pivot, pivot. And so maybe it's not that word that makes sense in this time as much as really it is being nimble and putting yourself out there in a different way. So how are you adapting to what's going on in the environment? So I wanted to share with you 7 rules, if you will, timeless principles that are going to help you. They're really fundamentals. And these are the things that are so key. So regardless of where we are, we have to make sure that we're always holding true to the key fundamentals in your marketing and how you're showing up, right? So the first one is really having a deep understanding of who your customer is. Now, you're probably like, yeah, I've done the avatar exercise. I think it's really, really important. Got it. Check the box, Patty. But I have to tell you, even in the coaching that I do, and I have had these discussions with different people around this first point, this key fundamental, it is one of the key components of the positioning work that I do, is having a deep understanding. And by deep, I mean real deep, 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 deep. So do you have a deep understanding of your customer? Because fact is, we want to make sure that you have an understanding of the levels of awareness that your premium prospect has around their problem, your product, other competitors, etc., etc. So the thing is, and I read this in one of the copywriting books, and I took some notes here because I journal everything. And so what's happening is that over the past 100 years, the statistics of buying behavior has pretty much been the same, right? So there's about 5% super wealthy, 5% do really well, 10% are doing okay, 60% of the population struggle their entire lives, and 20% of people are dead broke at the beginning to the end, right? So those are the stats if you think about it just at a real macro level. And when you think about changing those stats, it is the way that it is, and you're not going to change that. But what you can do is have hyper awareness of who your market is. So within those stats, who is it that you really want to work with, and what is the value that you're providing? So just forget trying to change the stats is what I know what it, yes, I remember who said this now. You're not going to be able to change that. What you are going to be able to do is adapt to who you're speaking to so that they see you as the primary solution, as the one to go to. Okay. Number 2, a key marketing principle is that you're not going to win business trying to cater to everybody, right? So I can always tell when somebody has a gap in their marketing, when I ask, okay, so who's your perfect customer? Well, it really is for everybody. No, that means that you don't have a solid understanding, because again, you cannot cast a wide net into the ocean and think that you're only going to get really premium fish, right? You have to really get an understanding, because if you don't, then you're subject to grabbing scrappy stuff that you don't want in that fish net. So poor customers, like people who don't have the money to spend with you, very, very rarely are ever going to become good customers. And this is something that it was kind of hard for me to understand at the beginning, is that a person convinced against their will is of the same opinion still. And so I wish I can go back in time and mark all the times that I was trying to convince somebody to buy my stuff, to invest in my service. And that was like that lack mentality that customer was having at that point in time. Inevitably just forcing it turned out that they weren't a good client for me. They weren't a good customer. And so those types of customers are not going to be in it for the long haul. You're not going to develop a strong rapport with them, so that it's really compromising your lifetime value, right? When you're convincing somebody, it turns exhausting. It's just not a good fit. And you're really pushing, really swimming upstream for something that inevitably is not going to work out. And then you're in a situation where you're just dying to get rid of them. So remember this: winners don't like hanging out with non-winners, or as a mentor used to say, winners don't like hanging out with losers. So consider yourself a winning brand. And as a winning brand and a winning coach or consultant, entrepreneur, you want to hang out with other winners. So your clients should be winners too. Very, very important. All right. Tip number 3, your clients do not want what works or what's old. They want what's new, shiny, and new and fun, right? So in the information marketing industry, everything, as you may have heard, is secrets, right? Here are the top 3 secrets that I'm going to be sharing with you. So you might have seen that on webinars, and there's all kinds of secrets. And what you want to do is create intrigue with the marketing that you're doing, okay? Really thinking about what would be something where your customer or potential client would say, tell me more about that. I always say this, and that's like kind of my way of checking if my copy is on point. If somebody asks, tell me more about that, then I'm like, boom, I hit it, right? So you definitely want to make sure that what you have to say is shiny and new, because that curiosity and that moment when somebody says, tell me more about that, that's just absolute gold. So that's why you've seen those whole thing about secrets, because that is a way to engage people so that they're saying, tell me more about that. Another thing is really being good about being a good storyteller, right? Most people, when I ever coach my clients on how to give presentations, or if they're talking on a webinar or video, is that you want to make sure that whatever key point you're conveying, you want to really ground that key point with a story. See, the story is the thing that anchors the idea. And more importantly, I can tell you that when I've done this, there are stories that I tell about my life, or about clients, or about things that I have experienced for myself. And when I anchor a key point that I want them to know, and I kind of wrap it in a nice story, especially if it's a story of transformation, people are going to remember that. So one of the things that happens over and over again is when people get this visual of for example, I've transitioned from employee mindset to entrepreneur mindset. I ground that story in that when I was given my pink slip in my corporate job, and I was packing all my tchotchkes in where I worked in corporate. Like I had my office and I had a bunch of pictures of my kids and their color drawings and their little clay pots that they had built. And I'm packing all these things in the cardboard box. And as I'm packing all these things in the cardboard box with all these things, I felt pathetic. I felt this sense of patheticness. I don't know if that's a word, but it was that moment where I realized that my job is not an asset and that I was no different than the French fry guy at McDonald's. My job was not an asset. And everything I thought that I had done, like going to school and getting my master's and doing all that stuff and securing a really great job in corporate, it all got taken away from me in that moment. And that was just that pivotal moment where I just felt awful and I knew something had to change. So when I talk about my journey and I cement it with that one story of transformation, people really remember that. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. You're no different than the French fry guy. Yeah, what a visual. So point there is that you want to make sure that people buy stories, they connect with stories. And if you can trigger that connection with a story, connecting at an emotional level, you won. That's just the best thing to do. It's a great skill to develop. Okay, number 5, the wealth is in your list. So one of the things that I didn't learn early enough was the importance of developing your list, growing your list. And by list, I mean your email list. And while some people focus on having their IG or Facebook, or the amount of fans that they have, their Instagram or their Snapchat or TikTok, fact of the matter is, if those people are not on your email list, you don't have an asset, because Facebook or Instagram or any of these social media platforms can unceremoniously shut you down with no explanation because they don't have to give you one. And you've signed away under their terms and conditions that they have the right unilaterally to take away your complete account, right? So even if you have massive popularity on social, yes, that's good to have, but bring them onto your email list because the magic is in the list. And really, really focus on growing your list, because at any given time, especially with the downturn of the economy, you can go to your list and create an offer and extend an offer of something that would be of value to them. And the people that have that list are the ones that are making things happen. And the ones that don't have a list are the ones that are having a hard time in this turning economy. So remember, the wealth is in the list. Okay, we're about halfway through with this episode, but I wanted to make sure that you knew about my new Positioning to Profit quiz so that you can discover how to use the key pillars of positioning to give yourself the ultimate edge for your business. It's an assessment, personalized plan of action to overcome these roadblocks that are keeping you from even more profit. So head on over to positioningquiz.com. All right, let's continue with the show. Okay, we are keeping on with this list. Number 6, the best thing that you can do is be polarizing. Yeah, you don't want to be a jerk online. That's not the intention, but there's a whole science to creating intrigue, whether it's creating intrigue, creating curiosity. But if you can be polarizing, those are the people that stand out. And there's a really creative way to do that, is to create a pattern break in the message that you have to say. So think about what you're saying in the market. What are you hearing in the market? What are your competitors saying that you can flip it on its head and have a new conversation so that people say, again, wait a minute, tell me more about that. So you want to create that moment where you're stopping people in their tracks and creating a pattern break so that you really, really stand out. Now, that could come with perceived risk, because sometimes that may be perceived as polarizing. And if you're willing to take that risk, yes, there's going to be people who don't like it, and there's going to be people who think you are ballsy as hell, and they're going to be like, bravo. And so it's really up to you at what level you want to be polarizing, but that is tip number 6. And the last one, tip number 7, or principle number 7, is that you want to change as needed. So your stuff that got you here won't get you there. Some stuff works forever. Some things come and go. And what's performing that I need to pay attention to. So take inventory of the way that your marketing has been going. And maybe there's a webinar that you've had. I know that I'm changing up my webinar. I'll have an announcement on checking out my webinar, even around the conversations I'm having right now because of what's going on. I'm changing things, right? It's not that the other information is no longer working. It's not that the messaging is no longer working, but always keep in mind that you want to meet people where they are. So as of the recording of this podcast right now, there's a lot of conversation around the pandemic, the economy, the changing economy, etc. So I'm taking inventory. I'm taking inventory alongside with my clients and figuring out what's working, what's not working right now. What do we need to be paying attention to, and how do we need to change the conversation so that we're the first ones on the forefront of a new conversation. Again, this is a little bit of an extension of the pattern break idea that I mentioned. So this one is basically taking inventory of what's working in your marketing and what's not. So maybe pause that webinar that you have, or instead of it being that webinar, have another name for another webinar with a different headline and hook so that it really is meeting people where they are in that moment. So pay attention to that. And then prioritize that effort so that it's giving you clarity on the quickest path to cash, because there is a lot of, flexing and being nimble. And as we've heard many, many times, it's time for change. You got to pivot. You have to adapt to this new reality that we're all confronted with. So I hope that helps. Just some thoughts that I was jotting down around what is happening right now, and really taking inventory of our marketing approaches, and always recognizing that this is a dynamic process, right? The marketing that you're doing, like never planting your feet and saying, yep, this is it. I'm going to kill it with this one webinar forevermore. And it's just not the way that it works. So I hope this was helpful to you, and definitely let me know what you thought about this. Of course, I am on social. So that is in my outro, but I'm on social, and I will have more good stuff coming up. Like I mentioned, I have an online training that I'm putting together, and I'll announce that real soon within the next week. So probably on the next podcast episode. All right. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for checking out the Positioning to Profit podcast. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. And also, it would mean the world to me if you would take a quick moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or your favorite podcast player. It really helps to get the word out about the podcast and, of course, the featured guests. And lastly, please make sure to connect with me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm on all of them, and use hashtag positioning to profit so that I can search you out and connect that way too. All right. Thanks so much. See you next time.